When we started our food forest, the idea of growing bananas wasn't super exciting to me, to be honest with you. I was not a big fan of bananas growing up, but now that we have them and an abundance of them in our system, they're one of my absolute favorite plants that we have in here. So that's what we're talking about today, folks, bananas. Good afternoon, my sweet friends, and welcome back to Peaceful Bird Gardens. My name is Dani. It is an incredibly steamy day here, the first week of fall in Central Florida, zone 9B, 10A. It's just hot. That's just all there is to it. So I'm standing in the back food forest this morning with my bananas, the dwarf bananas specifically. Now, what are bananas? Bananas are herbaceous perennial plants. They're not trees. They originated in Southeast Asia. The scientific name is Musa acuminata, and they cultivated them to be more edible, essentially. Bananas used to have huge seeds in them. Some still do. There are some wild bananas out there that still have those gigantic seeds in them. But the teeny tiny, almost non-existent seeds that you see in bananas today, that was not always a thing. They were completely bred out because they weren't the most pleasant to eat with all of those seeds in them. Now you can find banana plants of all varieties in pretty much every subtropical and tropical location on the planet, according to my research. Somebody's growing bananas somewhere. We're not only limited now to subtropical and tropical areas thanks to greenhouses and, technology. Christmas lights, that helps with bananas, keeping them warm where it's cold. Bananas are very interesting because they get so tall, yet they're still an herbaceous green plant. They're actually more closely related to ginger than to anything else, really. They don't have woody tissue. Now, bananas grow from a root known as a rhizome. You get all these babies that come popping up all along a healthy rhizome of a banana plant. And when they're going through their vegetative phase, which is all of this leaf growth that you see, putting out new flags one after the other, that's the vegetative growth phase. They then go into their flowering phase, and they have what's known as an inflorescence that starts in their pseudostem here. And this is just this is a young dwarf Cavendish here. So it starts in there, or this might be a ladyfinger that's not supposed to be here. Don't you just love it when plants do what they want to? Here in the pseudostem is where the flower actually forms. As I said, it's called an inflorescence. And then it comes out of the top here and kind of cascades over very beautifully. The first sign that you're going to have a flower in a banana plant is what we call stumpy leaf. I love that term, stumpy leaf. So I'm always looking for stumpy leaf in my banana patches. Before the flower emerges, you get a modified leaf. It's much shorter and in stature than these great big, beautiful leaves that come out before it. And that's when you know your flower is coming. You get stumpy leaf. And once the flower emerges, it can take 3 to 5 months before your bananas are actually ripe and ready to harvest. Now let me take you over and show you a rack of our bananas that are almost ready. They're not yellow yet. So I'm standing here with my dwarf namwa, or pasangawak. And if you can see, she's got these beautiful fingers of bananas. And at the ends, this is where the female flower was. These are this is the ovary of the flower. And the female flowers were here, down here below. Once there was some male flowers and a bud hanging down from here. But what we do, once the bees have finished with the flowers, we'll cut this male bottom section off. She does not need bees to pollinate. We do not have to have bees to make fruit, but I love feeding the bees and they absolutely go crazy for these. So I usually wait until after the bees have finished. Now, you don't have to cut the bud off of the bottom of the banana rack. You can leave it, but we cut it off because I believe that she'll put more energy into producing these bad boys up here, the fruit, if I cut this portion off when the bees are finished with it. All of these little male flowers, they're not necessary. So we just compost them, or you can eat them. Actually, you can eat banana blossoms. That is the banana flower once it emerges. Now, it can take anywhere from a year to 18 months for your banana plants to actually produce flowers, depending on the variety. And as I said, once they start producing, they tend to put out babies like crazy, even beforehand. So this that's producing the fruit here, she's getting ready to die, unfortunately, because once they produce fruit, that plant will not, she'll die. She dies off. She goes out with a bang, so to speak. We will chop and drop her once she's finished with the fruit. I don't leave them standing up. They just become a hazard. So we just chop and drop them. Now behind her is this is her child. She's actually getting ready to produce fruit herself. This big baby here started, oh my goodness, maybe 6 months after we planted her. She put out a baby about 6 months after we planted the original. So just so you know, once you have bananas, you've got bananas. They just kind of pop up all over the place. All right, so when do we harvest? When do we harvest our bananas? We try to wait until they have a little bit of yellow just along the bottom of the rack here, and then I'll just cut off the whole rack and we'll hang it in the house and we'll take them as, you know, as they ripen. Some people let them do that on the tree itself. They'll actually wait until the bananas are ripe and they'll just take them one at a time and just leave them on the tree. I can't do that here. I have squirrels and other, you know, little sweet fuzzy animals that as soon as they smell or see a ripe banana, they would be all over it. So we actually take ours when they're just starting to turn yellow, very similar to what I do with my pineapples. I wait until the bottom is just a little bit on the yellow side. That way I know that the sugars are, you know, really in there, but it's not going to be super enticing yet to a squirrel or another, you know, one of my little furry friends. These are by far the best tasting bananas. Compared to a grocery store Cavendish banana, these are amazing. Now we do grow dwarf Cavendish. It's not my favorite, but it's easy to grow, it's easy to access. You can get them pretty much anywhere. This is a dwarf Namois. We also grow dwarf Brazilian, ladyfinger, and I might even have a baby double Mahoy in here, which is a Cavendish variety with 2 flowers. It actually produces 2 racks of fruit at the same time. I say maybe because I may have lost some in here during the banana shuffle. I highly encourage you, even if you live in a climate that you can grow bananas, do it. It's so rewarding and easy, and they're just absolutely gorgeous in the landscape. If you don't live in a climate where you can grow them readily, get a dwarf variety, put them in a pot, see how it goes, keep them on your patio. You can bring them in when it's cool. Or, you know, build a hoop house or put them in a greenhouse or something along those lines. We grow our bananas in a circular formation, kind of. Not really. It's more of an oblong or a rectangle, but the banana circle concept still applies. We only grow banana in this section. I've tried to grow other things, but we do so much chop and drop in here that it just doesn't make any sense for me to put other plants in here. I smushed them. I've smushed ginger. I try to grow ginger in here with my bananas because they like the same kind of conditions. They like consistently moist soil. They like a little bit of shade. They're totally fine with some shade. But when I was chopping and dropping, I forgot they were in there and I smashed them. This is what the underneath of our bananas kind of looks like in here. And I've got a little baby banana down in there, and the baby bananas can actually take much more shade than the adults. Bananas are tropical rainforest plants, so they can actually take some good shade. You're just not going to get the fruit that you're looking for if you put them in too much shade. The more sun, the sweeter, the bigger the fruit, generally speaking. But be mindful, because you can also get sunburn. Banana plants, if they're in too intense sun, can get sunburn, believe it or not. This is our dwarf section, and we had all of our bananas growing in this section at one time. Our tall bananas, the ladyfinger bananas, the dwarf Cavendish, the dwarf Namois, the dwarf Brazilian. But because they were shading so many of my other plants, we decided that wasn't a good situation to keep them over here. Last year, we had a major storm come through, and we had 7 large, actually 8 large ladyfinger bananas over here, and 7 of them toppled each other during the storm. They just felt like dominoes. And we lost some fruit because, well, that was why they toppled. They were so top heavy. That was not ideal, not to mention the shading I mentioned. So we have since converted this to just a dwarf banana section so that they're not it's not creating too much shade for the rest of my garden. My Namois are still a bit tall. so they can still do a bit of shading. It's not to the degree of the ladyfinger bananas. I'm going to take you over and show you our ladyfinger bananas. Now, this is a section beside my house, as a matter of fact. It's kind of like a little narrow entryway. It's the house on one side, the fence on the other, and just like a narrow pathway. It's very shady over here, relatively shady over here. I didn't have a whole lot that was thriving, so I planted chaya, I planted katuk, and I planted bananas because all three of those can absolutely handle a little bit of shade. And I also have sisu spinach down here that's not directly in where I chop and drop with the bananas. So these are, I did have dwarfs over here at one time, but I've since moved the dwarfs over into the other banana patch because they were getting too much shade over here. But my ladyfingers, they're protected by the house. They're protected by from the wind, by the chaya and the fence over here on the other side. So my hope is that in the future, these will be a bit more protected from wind. And not only that, we lost some bananas in the frost that we had last year and the freeze that we had in December. So my hope is that the radiant heat from my house will also help to keep these bananas a bit warmer during cold winters that we have every once in a while. We had a 3-day freeze last year in December, which is unusual for us. They also require a lot of nutrients, which is why we do the chop and drop method with them and have them in a banana circle. I am constantly just putting input, compost and green material and mulch. They want to be consistently moist, but they don't want wet feet. They do not like to be soaked for long periods of time, but they want consistent moisture, which is where mulch is super handy for that. Now, if you grow them in a lawn situation where you have them kind of out in the middle of your lawn or in your backyard, you know, in your lawn, my suggestion would be create a perimeter around your banana plants. 3 feet's good, 6 feet's awesome. Anything, you know, anything you can give them, really. Just a bit of a buffer from the grass, so that you can not only provide chop and drop for them in that space and mulch and those types of amendments, but you can give their roots a bit of room to breathe. They will compete with your grass. If you're providing fertilizer, the grass is going to take it before the bananas may actually get a chance to have access to it. So just keep that in mind. I've had clients of mine, that their bananas end up looking chlorotic and not healthy. Just give them a little bit of a buffer, give their roots a bit of room to grow, and that's just my suggestion for growing them in a lawn type situation. I hope that was helpful, my sweet friends. Bananas. If you find this content useful, if you're interested in growing a food forest or gardening for wildlife with native plants, give us a like. Come on the journey with us, hit subscribe, and I hope to see you again on Peaceful Bird Gardens. Have a lovely afternoon, my sweet friends.